want to welcome everyone. I'm like overwhelmed here. I want to welcome everybody to my first ever Zoom wine tasting, coming to you live from my kitchen. And yes, I am in my pajamas. So if there's any doubt in your mind, it's a Saturday night at 7:30 and I have my pajamas on. So I want you all to know, first of all, this is being recorded for people who couldn't log on right this second. They're welcome to come back and, you know, watch it, and you'll be able to watch it hopefully on a YouTube channel, and I'll send everybody the link for that. So I want to give you some ground rules first. First things first, if you can see your names, everybody has their names on their little squares. If you don't have your name on there, can you please put it? So just so I know who's here. So I see most people, but some of them, I see the singer's friends. That's okay. I know who you are. It's so funny. There's people sitting on decks. There's people everywhere. We have people from the DC area to all the way up in Dover, New Hampshire. And the farthest people are in the San Francisco area, which is amazing. So that's really cool. So anyway, so a few ground rules. To keep the noise down, I would like you all to stay muted. If you have something to talk about, something you want to talk about, or a question you want to ask, or if you want to ask it, or if you want me to read it, there's the chat. Hopefully everybody knows how to use the chat. If you don't know how to use the chat, just, you know, make yourself known and I'll find you. You can text me, you can do whatever, and I will answer your questions, or we will answer your questions, okay? If you all look at my name right now, I am changing my first and last name to my cell phone number. So what I want everyone to do is at some point during this tasting, I want everyone to take a selfie of your group or your single self or your whole group or all of you. You know, I want pictures, and I want you to text them to that phone number that I have underneath me, because I want to know who's here and who's joining us. And okay, so that's the first ground rule is we're going to stay muted. If you have something you want to say or a question you want to ask, put it in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll get to it. I'll read it to the group. We'll take questions after each wine. So Steve's going to talk about each wine, and then we'll take questions after each wine. So that's ground rule number one. Ground rule number two is put your name on the screen so I know who's here and I can match your beautiful faces with your names. And again, as you can see, I replaced my name with my phone number because I want everyone to send me pictures throughout the evening. Throughout the next 45 minutes to an hour, or however long this takes, let me know if you're enjoying yourselves. And if you are, let me know if you want to do this another time with maybe beer, or we could do a bourbon tasting. We could do wines of France. We could do wines of Spain. We could do champagnes. We can do, I know my friend Molly is a big champagne drinker, so we can do that. And if you're having a really good time and you have a fundraising group that you would like to do this for, this is actually a fundraiser for my synagogue, Temple Sinai. And we're making a lot of money tonight for Temple Sinai, which is good. So I am very rentable. So if you want to rent me and do something like this for your group, that would be fabulous. So the next ground rule is refer to the sheets of paper that I hopefully put in every single one of your boxes. I hope I got it to everybody. If you're missing the 4 sheets of paper, text me and let me know, and I can send them to you throughout the course of the evening. Inside there's a placemat, and it shows the order of the wines, and then there's tasting notes so you can keep notes while Steve talks. There's a little description of what you should be eating and filling your stomachs with, so I don't want to see anybody getting sick tonight. And then the fourth one was the link to get here. So hopefully you all have that. Please make sure that you all have food in front of you, because if you're drinking these wines on an empty stomach and you're drinking too much, the evening is not going to end well. Okay. So make sure you have some food, some bread, some cheese, some meats, some nuts, something, okay? And when you pour each wine, when Steve talks to you about the wines and you start to pour each wine, pour yourself a little, 1 ounce, 2 ounces at the most. Don't go crazy. You could go crazy afterwards. If you like something, you drink more of it. But let's just start out with like 1 ounce to maybe 2 ounces, just so I don't want anybody getting crazy on me. And lastly, well, not really lastly, but if there's a wine that you really, really like, let me know and I can order more for you. So any one of these wines on your second sheet, it'll say what the wine is, and it also has a price per bottle. So keep in mind that it's almost the holidays and you want to buy gifts for your hairdresser or your manicurist or your garbage man or your lawn guy or your best friend, or probably the teacher in your life who's probably working seriously hard this year and needs some wine. The good thing about these wines that we're doing tonight are they're all reasonably priced and they're all good wines, good quality wines, and they're also fairly obscure. So it's not like a Kendall Jackson or something like that everybody has. You can actually get away with people thinking that these are $20, $30 wines, and they're all really in the $10 range. So throughout the evening, I have a few contests we're going to play, so I'll just throw them in. So keep on your toes. Don't forget to keep sending me pictures. My phone keeps pinging. I love that. Thank you very much. And so lastly, without further ado, oh, Jen, you're missing your eating sheet. Jen and Greg are missing. So just start stuffing food down your face. Just grab some bread. I don't care what it is. Just don't get drunk. Okay. Anyway, and then finally, I want to turn this over to my very good friend, Steve. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about him. Besides the fact that Steve and I'm a little embarrassed to say this, Steve and I have probably known each other for closing in on 50 years. And lo and behold, we both ended up in the booze business together, which is kind of crazy, but we've been friends forever. And we also kind of work together, as he's been one of my salespeople for 1,000,000 years. Steve is Steve Pinchuk. He's also a Cinnaminson High School class of 86 for any of you that are joining in from class of 86. Steve has worked for Vintage Imports since 2005. The company itself was started in 1980. Steve's the vice president of sales. They do business as an importer and a wholesaler of wines and spirits in Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and New York. Steve is very big on pairing foods and wines. He doesn't have a favorite wine, but he's very big on pairing foods and wines and, the whole, enjoying everything together. His philosophy is to drink what you like and not be intimidated by others. He and his beautiful wife, Dawn, who is sitting right next to him, but not showing her. There she is. They have traveled all over the world trying wines and bringing them back to his company. And he has a great palate and great knowledge. And I'm going to turn it over to him in a minute. So again, just remember, if you have a question, put it in the chat. Keep eating. Don't pour too much just now. And if you want to watch Steve as a whole, make him your highlighted speaker. If you want to watch everybody else and see what everybody else is doing, then keep it in the gallery. So now I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
Thank you so much, Stace. Can you hear okay? Is that good? Awesome. It's very nice to see familiar faces, old friends, and new, hopefully new friends in the crowd out there. So thank you for supporting Stacy and myself and Temple Sinai in this endeavor tonight, and I hope you all have fun. I am not, everybody always says, oh, you're wine expert, wine. I hate the whole snobbish part of the wine business. And for me, it's really just about having fun with wine. And like Stacy said, I think to me, I love trying different things, and it's always about what I'm eating, where I am. And I think these wines that we selected tonight were not the most serious wines you might have for steak in that environment. We tried to pick things that were fun. And to me, the best thing that you're able to do tonight, hopefully, you don't normally open 5 bottles of wine side by side. And so one of the questions I often get is, how did you learn about wine to begin with? And to me, it all starts with the basis for comparison. And you can't really talk about what acidity is or what the fruit is like or how much oak is in a wine if you don't really have anything to compare it to. So I think in our little trip around the world tonight, we tried to highlight some different styles and some different things that maybe you're normally exposed to, and hopefully enjoy it with us. So I guess above and beyond that, if you do have any questions along the way, please put it in the chat there, and Stacy and I'll get you an answer either via the chat, or we'll broadcast it out and let the question be heard by everybody, and try and teach everybody a little something while we're all having fun and drinking. Right, exactly. So I guess with that, Stacy, should we hop into the first wine? Do you want to
I think that's great. On that? So, on your placemat, you have how you're supposed to taste them. And Steve, you might disagree with.
No, I certainly don't. Okay. This is exactly how I would have run with it.
Oh, so. Goody. Okay, so I haven't lost my knowledge. All right, so the first one we're going to do is the bright orange one.
Yeah, the bright orange one is Sol Real Vinho Verde. I don't know how many people have had wines from Portugal before. Some people have had port and know that's a fortified red wine that's, great with dessert and all that stuff. But Vinho Verde is far and away the most popular wine coming out of Portugal. The name means vino, wine, verde, green. And it can call it green wine for a couple of different reasons. One is it's the grapes don't get super ripe and make a super high alcohol wine. You may notice that this one tastes a little bit fruity. It's only 9.5% alcohol. So for me in the wine sales business, I like it because you can drink a lot of it at 9.5%. And you may notice that when you first taste it, it's got a slight effervescence to it, which is pretty interesting. There's a lot of ways to carbonate wine. I don't want to say that this is the most déclassé because it's a very little bit of CO2 that gets injected into Vinho Verde. Historically, it was done naturally, but over time, they just found that it was more reliable and controllable to put a requisite amount of CO2 in the wine. But it's made from 3 grapes that you've probably never heard of, Trejadora, Laureiro, and Arinto. All 3 of them are white varieties, and this is the part of Portugal that's right on the Atlantic Ocean. So it's in the northwestern part of Portugal. A lot of people may be familiar with the Spanish grape Albarino, which comes from the region of Rias Baixas. And this is right near there. So it's got a maritime or Atlantic influence. There's a lot of breeze coming in off the coast. It's a wet region. A lot of people think that wine grapes only like it dry, but this is a very green, lush area of Portugal. And it produces these nice, light, fruity wines. So I don't know how everybody typically likes to taste wine. For me, it's a quick swirl and a quick smell and a quick taste to kind of get acquainted with it. And if you get acquainted with this one, you'll find it's pretty friendly. Like I said, light, fruity, easy to drink, and with a teeny little bit of spritz to it. I wouldn't call it a sparkling wine. I might use a word like frizzante, a little bit sparkling. But I think it's pretty light and delicious and goes great with all the seafood in that region with the bright acidity that it has, partially from the grapes. Again, there's a relationship between sugar and acid. If you have a high alcohol wine, it typically won't have a lot of acidity. When you have a low alcohol wine or a lower alcohol wine like this, it tends to have some bright acidity. So what do you think, Stace?
One of my favorite summer wines. I drink that all summer long because you can drink it all day and still stand up.
So I don't know if people have had a chance to taste Vinho Verde and what they think of it. Like I said, it's very light, easy to drink, 9.5% alcohol. Great with like up in that area, pescadito frito, the fried fish that is pretty prevalent in Portugal. Like I said, coming off the coast. And it's pretty interesting the way they grow the vines there. A lot of times if we've been to California or even if we've been to vineyards locally, they grow the vines pretty low, 3, 4, 5 feet up. But in this part of the world, it's so wet and there's a lot of moisture and humidity that they tend to trellis the vines 10, 12 feet off the ground. It's the only place I've ever seen it done like that, but it's to prevent mold and rot and problems with the grapes. So.
All right, do we have any questions? Raise your hand or let me know.
I see there's one comment there that says it's a little dry, and you might be surprised actually because it has 14 grams per liter of residual sugar. And again, I guess if you don't have anything sweeter in front of you, it's hard to sort of triangulate what 14 grams per liter means. But it's a good bit of sugar actually in this wine. And while it's far from a sweet wine, it certainly is something that I think is appealing to people, kind of like a Riesling, again, around that 9% alcohol, that is appealing to people who like wines a little bit sweeter.
And then somebody, the Melitzes said that they're not really white wine drinkers, but this is awesome. It's good. It's a good food wine, and it's light and easy.
Yeah, and inexpensive, and always inexpensive. And like we were talking before, Stace, about, or I mentioned Albarino. And this region, the Vinho Verde, which is interesting too, because the grape kind of shares the name with the region, but they're very prominently growing Alvarinho, which is just the Portuguese way of saying Albarino. So again, very similar soils, very similar climate, very similar Atlantic influence on the grapes. Some people even say you can almost taste a little brininess or saltiness in the wine that, you know, if you're thinking about where it's grown and what the soils are like after millions of years and so forth, then it's not surprising the wine would pick up some flavors from the environment that it's grown in.
Everybody's going to taste something different too.
Yeah, I think so. Did you taste this one?
Oh, you have a question that says, do they make it without added CO2?
They do make a lot of still wines in the area without added CO2, but not typically bottled as Vinho Verde. You can get them bottled. Typically, they will then be bottled as the varietal name. So you can buy varietal Lauriero, varietal Tresadora, or most commonly, again, varietal Alvarinho. If you want, I don't want to say a finer wine, but certainly a more vinified wine. This is meant to, they make millions of bottles of Vinho Verde in this region, and it's kind of just like the world's summertime picnic wine, and it really is very popular, but they do have certainly some wines without the effervescence. And it's interesting because they have a red wine and a rosé wine that also have the effervescence, which is pretty interesting also to have a slightly fizzy red like they make from the region.
So a couple of many other people said, would this be a good pairing with sushi, or that they normally have it with sushi? So that's
absolutely, again, seafood of all kinds. I think, you know, a lot of people, I hate to tell people what to drink. And, you know, it's something people are always like, what's your favorite? What's the best? And again, you know, too many times I've been out, whether it's a business meeting or otherwise, and somebody wants to have Cabernet with sushi. And I'm, look, man, if that's what floats it for you, who am I to say that you shouldn't have Cabernet with sushi? The laws are not that stringent. I personally don't have Cabernet with sushi, but I think when it comes to white wines and pairing white wines with sushi, I think it's, you know, I think we've talked about this, I think you and I, Stacey. I always have this vision of wines in kind of they're either to me square or they're round. To me, wines, and without going overboard and talking a lot of wine mumbo jumbo shop talk, wines that do go through malolactic fermentation and have that acid converted have a very different texture, a very different flavor. And I prefer with sushi, with seafood and anything like that, what I would call angular wines with sharp edges and a lot of acidity. And they typically come from cool places. There's definitely a thing that you'll see. If it's hot and dry, the wines will typically be red and big. And if it's cooler, the wines will typically be a little bit lower in alcohol and really feature a lot more acidity. So definitely a good wine for sushi, and so many others. Again, to me, sushi doesn't require anything, but I don't like a lot of oak on wines with sushi. I like sharp edges and bright, crisp flavors and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely a good one to pair with sushi. Yeah, this is all done. This is all tank. It's pressurized in tank, fermented. Dawn asked me if it was done in steel. Yes, it's all fermented in stainless steel. No oak on this one. In fact, on any of these wines, only the last wine we have tonight was aged in oak for a variety of reasons. We can talk about that as we go.
Okay, very good. So if nobody has any other questions, we'll move on, because, you know, we also don't want to be here till 3 o'clock in the morning. Although maybe we will, who knows? Okay, I have nothing else to do. I'm in my pajamas, so. Oh,
All right.
So one last question. Are all Vino Verdes light white carbonated? So that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, again, if it says Vino Verde, not all wines from the Vino Verde region would be, because you can get rosé wines that are carbonated, red wines that are carbonated, and a lot of white wines that aren't carbonated. And you can also there's quite a wide range of carbonation depending on the brand you buy. This one is not what I would say the most aggressively carbonated. It's measured in bars of CO2, but because it's only bottled with a screw cap, they don't allow it to get too pressurized. It's usually just meant to give it a light spritz. But again, not all wines in the region, and certainly not in the country, have that effervescence.
Okay.
So on to wine number 2.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so it's a long hop to New Zealand for wine number 2. But New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, I don't know if you all get bombarded with Kim Crawford commercials like we do here, but it's been a very popular wine over the last, must be decade or more now, and it's really helped to put a style of wine on the map that typically was not all that popular or common. Sauvignon Blanc, I think, is in a lot of ways probably one of the toughest grapes for winemakers, because you can't really do a lot to it, and there's a lot of discussion about how to kind of coax the best flavors out of Sauvignon Blanc. I think depending on, people often say winemaking isn't that hard. You just put yeast in grape juice and it'll make wine. And I guess in the really most basic of terms, that's true. But there are so many decisions that get made along the way with regard to how to ferment and at what temperature to ferment. And depending if it's done warm or cold, I think it will take longer or shorter for the yeast and the fermentation to do its thing. But in the case of Sauvignon Blanc, I think it does better when they run this with cooler fermentations and preserves a lot of the aromatics. That, to me, this is a very aromatic wine. People talk a lot about the different aromas and flavors in Sauvignon Blanc. People talk about herbaceousness and grassiness and grapefruit, citrus, guava, passion fruit, tropical fruit, whatever it is. But again, it has a lot to say as far as wine goes. And again, it's one of these high acid whites or higher acid whites like the first one. It's got a little bit more alcohol, so in order to do that, the grapes are riper when they make the wine, measured in bricks of sugar, or at least that's how we're taught with our measuring system. And Sauvignon Blanc doesn't particularly get that ripe, where Cabernet grapes are optimally harvested at 24, 25, 26 or more bricks of sugar in the grapes. These are frequently 21, 22, 23 at the most. And you get these, first of all, again, a little bit lower alcohol. I don't want to say you'd never see it, but you'd probably be hard pressed to see a New Zealand Sauv Blanc much above 13 or 13.5%, which is where we are with this one. And I think it's a really, again, versatile food wine, again, with those citrus flavors, depending on what you're eating. But I also think it's just a pretty good, refreshing patio libation for the spring, summer, and fall. So it's still selling an awful lot of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and this one is made. It's a pretty cool family called Hunters from Marlborough, New Zealand. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to taste this one yet and what they think of this one.
We're getting lots of good comments. The grapefruit taste, which is standard with this wine, and my friend Abby in Connecticut said the first thing she smelled was tacos. Never heard that description before, but that's okay. You have one question. Do you think Marlborough makes the best Sauvignon Blancs?
Oh, wow. No, that's a tough question. I mean, New Zealand, I think it's where we get the most Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand for sure. But there's a lot of other cool places in New Zealand that make really good Sauvignon Blanc. I think Marlborough certainly does a great job bringing price and quality together at a place where it's really good. I mean, the only Sauvignon Blanc that I probably would say that gets heralded more is the French Loire Valley Sauvignon Blancs, really chalky and minerally soil there. So things like Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé tend to have a little bit more minerality in the wine. So maybe to me, there's a little bit more complexity. But yeah, for Sauvignon Blancs from New Zealand, I think Stacy and I were talking about this before when we were first discussing what wines to use. And I think New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, more almost than any other wine, has less variation within the category. It's just that the winemakers know what the consumers want, and I think you're almost guaranteed to get that sort of grapefruity. It's a little bit pithy to me, and I kind of like it. You know, it's not like sweet ruby red grapefruit. It's got this like, you know, sort of a bitterness, but I would call it a little bit of a pleasant bitterness, like grapefruit pith, not over the top, but I really like it.
I've been drinking this one a lot. Actually, Chico and I have been drinking this one a lot the last couple of days. I actually got an extra case of this one, and there's not many left of it. So,
Tell me, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's one, like I said, we've done really well with it. And I mean, this was not a wine business. This was a wine tasting, not wine business. But this is a really interesting story of what you can do in the wine business. And So often they make a wine under more than one label. And Stacy knows very well about this from her time in the business. And it's not a bad thing. I don't even want to say it's our industry's dirty little secret. Sometimes the winery just makes a lot of wine and for whatever reason, we'll put a couple of different labels on the same bottle. So this is a good one because we were able, it was kind of a power move at work that we were able to get this label direct from the supplier. We sell another label that cost more money, but because we bring this one in direct from New Zealand and they had a really particular deal, they didn't want it on pallets. It was just one absolutely full container of wine at a time. And for us, we've been able to kind of build a little niche with this one where I think we're still the only ones in the US selling this wine, and it's been kind of a good little find for us.
Good. Everybody keep putting your comments in the chat. Some of them are a little obscene, so I can't read all of them.
Well,
but...
that is not cool if we were trying to have a family-friendly event here. It's all in good fun and all, but let's keep it on the level.
I like people's comments, though. I like the comments. So
Good.
let me just say a little nod if everybody's digging the Sauvignon Blanc. Melissa Urbanski. Oh, I thought Melissa was nodding at me. Oh, Diane, even you like this one? Oh, good. Kim Anderson, no. Oh, okay. I love everybody's food too. I'm very impressed with the spreads you people have out. This is very impressive.
It's a party.
Nice spread. Yeah, nice spread. All right, no other. I hear you, Carol. Oh, good. Yeah, it seems like people are really digging this one too. And again, this is another good food-friendly wine.
It goes with a lot of things, Stace. It's super versatile. And, I love wines that don't need food. Sometimes, especially as long as you and I have been doing this, when we first started, and I remember when you were in Cinnaminson and I was still working for the Mount Vernon company, and we sold a bunch of Bordeaux in those days. But Bordeaux back in those days, like, it needed food. It didn't taste good without it. And I tell people all the times, one of the things that's changed, if you've been in the wine business as long as, well, I've been in it longer than Stacy, of course, because she's younger than me. But no, so the third world, it used to be a lot of the inexpensive wine coming out of the third world was made in places that didn't really have good temperature control and winemaking technology. And in the past 20 or 30 years that we've been doing it, so much of that has leveled. And even places like Chile, where when I first started, it was the equivalent, I think they used to make wine in just big open swimming pools, or, back in the days when you heard about the antifreeze scandal from Austria or anything like that. The truth is, though, that even in really obscure places in the world now, they all have technology and temperature controlled tanks and consultants that come and tell them how to make the best wine. And I think it's been one of the nicest things in the past 10, 15, 20 years, is seeing the level of wine from all over the world kind of increase to a serviceable level. Like, there's not a lot of bad wine out there anymore like there was 20 years ago.
So here's an interesting question. My friend Deb says, what are the chances of a bad bottle with a screw top, a la being corked?
Well, that's an interesting question, only because we have a bad habit in the wine business. Like, when we get bad bottles, we typically call them corked, and our suppliers these days are like, well, it couldn't have been corked, buddy. It has a screw cap. And so, yes, the terminology may be different. However, there are puncture problems. I mean, it is certainly way more reliable than cork was. Again, 20 years ago, there was no question. Pretty much a bottle in a case was going to be bad. I mean, the flaw rate was 5, 6, 7, 8%. And it's really hard to sell a product and have somebody say, yeah, I didn't like it. Well, did you not like it because it was bad, or did you not like it because it was bad, you know? And so I think that's another thing in the past 20 years, along with the temperature control and winemaking technology and everything else improving, so has the cork technology. And you don't find nearly as much bad cork. But the screw caps are very reliable and would only be bad if they were in fact punctured or there was a problem on the bottling line. These high-tech bottling lines, whether cork or screw cap, they inject a little bit of gas into the wine when they seal it as a preservative, I don't know, argon usually or something like that. That's just a preservative to help the wine go a little bit longer. It's very small quantity and it's just considered negligible in the bottling process, but there's just a small puff of gas that goes in before they would put a cap or a cork in a bottle.
Excellent. All right. If there are no questions, we will move on because I already started the pink wine.
Yeah, who doesn't love pink wine? I mean,
Sorry.
some people love it. It's a fashion accessory, you know, people who like to pair their wines with their wardrobe or what have you. But pink wine's a lot of fun. And this is something that's really, people all over the world always drank pink wine. Here in the US, I guess we did too. If you say because we drank white Zinfandel, we drank pink wine. But drier rosés, like the one that we picked for you guys tonight, have only been kind of coming into their own here in the US in the past 5 or 10 years. And if you really think about it, there's a couple of different ways that you can make a rosé wine. The cheapest and oldest way to make a rosé wine is to take a whole bunch of white wine and put a little bit of red wine into it, and it's pink. And that's one way you can do it. That's certainly not what we did tonight. Another way you can do it, and this is not another part of the wine business that a lot of people don't know about, but in order to make red wines more powerful, they frequently bleed off during the pressing process some juice that looks a lot like our rosé tonight. If you put freshly pressed grape juice, much like you've probably seen with freshly squeezed orange juice in your refrigerator, it has a tendency to separate, and the heavier part of the orange juice with the pulp and the color will settle to the bottom, and up near the top of your orange juice that you just squeezed, it almost looks like water. And it's a similar thing with grape juice. And so oftentimes in the red wine making process, the French word is saignée or saigny, depending on how bad your French is, like mine. And if you basically pump in the right place in that vat, you'll do two things. You'll draw off a wine that looks like this, and you'll leave a more concentrated red wine to be bottled later and make people say, wow, that was a big, bold red wine. But that's not what we did tonight either. This is what they would call an intentional rosé. So these grapes were grown for no other reason except to make this wine. It's not the byproduct of making another wine. It's interesting for a whole bunch of reasons, I think. Partially because it's probably the only time you're gonna have this grape anytime soon, because it's a really unique grape that has kind of found a home making rosé wine. The grape is called Negrette. It comes from southwestern France, in this near the, I guess the next closest is south of Bordeaux. Again, towards the Atlantic coast, near a place called Toulouse, not all that far at this point from the Spanish border. But they grow this Negrette, and Negrette, quite frankly, didn't have a lot of merit making red wines. But what they found is if they grow it and harvest it at the right time, it will make a really pretty rosé wine. So how do we get the color in a rosé wine? Well, we don't get it by mixing red and white. We don't get it by bleeding off a vat of red and taking the white, pink stuff out. We get this because all of the color compounds in the grape are contained in the skins, so that if you harvest grapes, and these were harvested on the early side to preserve the acidity, but if you press them gently and don't leave the skins in contact with the juice for very long, you can control how pink your wine will be at that point. So frequently we're talking a matter of hours that those grape skins will stay in contact with the remaining juice before they're removed. So this one to me has unmistakable nose like strawberries. I just did every single time I drink this wine, it kind of slaps me in the face. I don't know what the aromas you guys get out of this one, but I really like this wine. The producer is called Lionel Osman, and Lionel's a guy a few years younger than me, in his 40s, but this was like, I think his kind of his college thesis project, that he was going to start what is basically a negociant in Southwest France. And that's basically somebody who went to what was very small family growers and agreed to buy their grapes and bottles them all under his label. And this has turned out to be his most successful wine. And I don't even think we included it in the information we sent tonight, Stace, but this was considered one of the Wine Enthusiast's top 100 values for 2020.
Wow. Yeah, the only one that I saw a rating on was the second to last one.
Yeah, this one.
Last one.
Yeah, this had 89 points, which, in the business is always like, it's not saying it wasn't good. Everybody's like, well, it didn't get 90. And I'm like, it's a $10 wine that got 89 points. You should love it. But yeah, tart strawberry, again, not sweet. Anybody who was looking for sweet, you're not going to find it here. Your alcohol on this one, I think it's close to 14%.
Wow.
So it's not a lightweight wine by any stretch, but it really is delicious and has, like I said, a lot of acidity that make it certainly very versatile for food. Best pairing to me, again, partially just because I like to eat it, but it's a good pairing for salmon, but certainly friendly by itself, any light fare, very versatile.
So you have a bunch of questions here. So let's start first. So Negrette is the grape, not the vineyard. So explain about what you can find in a rosé. It can be made of a million different things, and this is the grape Negrette.
Yes, the grape is Negrette. And, you can make rosé from any red grape. It's a little harder. You probably won't see as much Malbec rosé. Different varieties of grapes have different levels of color compounds in those skins. So it's certainly easier or more difficult to make a rosé out of a grape that doesn't have as much pigmentation in the skin as others. So Zinfandel, if you ever remembered what white Zinfandel used to look like, it wasn't, pale. They would call this almost onion skin in color. I know if you're not a wine person, that doesn't sound like an attractive color, but it's just the palest of pink, and it's what's become very popular in the business. People don't want a really deep-hued magenta cherry red rosé. It's all about how close to salmon pink or onion skin can you get. So I think these people do a really nice job on this wine, and it's again, it's one of our most popular direct imports along with the Rada.
So, and we're also getting a lot of different, I love this, the comments. Some people are getting a light pear scent, and
I get that for sure, pear, no doubt.
Very good. And then my friend Ann asked, do rosés tend to have more alcohol?
You can make them, I don't think it has any it's really anywhere on the spectrum, although quite frankly, I would say because you want the acid, essentially rosé is a red wine made like a white wine. That's what they're trying to do with a rosé. So if you let the grapes get very ripe to where you would have a lot of sugar at some point you can't have it both ways, or you're going to be somewhere in the middle like we were with that first wine. Either you have a lot of sugar and you don't have a lot of acid, or you have a lot of acid and don't have a lot of sugar. And with the having a lot of sugar, either you have a lot of alcohol and no sweetness, or low alcohol and more sweetness. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. But I think you could make, I mean, it's funny because, again, I'm on so many Zooms for work anymore. I had to take myself out of, no, this is not a work call. We in the wine business have been facing a lot of tariffs due to a controversy over Airbus and another one over digital media taxes. And we've been involved in a little bit of a trade war with the EU, which has been kind of unpleasant for us in our business. It's been particularly hard on France and Spain. And if you were not aware, we already paid higher taxes on higher alcohol wines when we import them. So the tariffs that were imposed at the end of last year were actually focused on lower alcohol wines. So rosé was hit brutally hard this year if it came from France or Spain. And for us in the wine business, it was our best year ever for Italian rosé. The Italians, for whatever reason, were spared the tariffs that we got from France and Spain on wine, but the Italians got it on balsamic vinegar and Reggiano cheese. And I know my wife was at the supermarket today and was saying how expensive the Reggiano cheese has gotten because that has gotten hit with those government tariffs. But Italian rosé has less tax imposed on it right now than French and Spanish rosé. But yeah, you could make, so why did I bring that up? Because one of our best-selling rosés used to come from Spain, and last year, because of the tariff of 25%, what they call ad valorem, which is not 25% increase in the tariff, but a 25% overall increase on the whole cost of goods. It's a brutal tax, and so we let one of our best-selling wines go last year without buying it. And so they contacted me just last week and said it's now 14.2% alcohol for 2021, which is coincidentally enough 1 point above the threshold for where you have to pay the tariff. So you can make a pretty high alcohol rosé if you want to. And if you balance it out with a lot of acid, it should still be pretty delicious.
Very nice. You know what, Steve? Do a real quick. My friend Molly made a comment about white zin and how she used to drink white zin her freshman year in college.
Yeah.
Let's make a distinction that white zin and rosé have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
Other than the fact that they are both visually pink. Yes. Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, certainly white zin is a pink wine made from a red grape. The biggest difference being the residual sugar in the wine, certainly as the defining reason why most people tended to leave white zin in the 90s or whenever it was.
Right, I don't think we have a fire at the Feinblums. I don't know why somebody just said that, but that's okay. All right, let's keep moving on because it is now 8:30. I didn't think we were going to be around this long, but this is great.
No, this is, I'm having fun. I hope everybody else
Is everybody having a good time? Good. I see
Again,
some thumbs up. I like the, oh. So I want to make a comment while everybody's cleansing their palates and hopefully eating some food. I want to make a little comment. If everyone can bring their attention to the little box that says Karen Mendelo. Wave over there. These are our Californians over here coming to us. You'll have to remind me where exactly you're coming from, but I don't want to give it away completely, but Karen is celebrating a very special birthday. Oh, I don't think she wants me to say. I'm not going to say how old you are. Oh, but she's having a special birthday. Does anybody have anything else going on?
Wait, can we just interrupt and say happy birthday, Karen?
Happy birthday, Karen.
We love you. Happy birthday. Have a great one. We hope you're enjoying.
Oh, and Karen wants to know, how were the wines chosen? That's a great question.
Yeah, how were they chosen, Stace? I think you and I looked for things that were fun, cool, different, versatile, off the beaten path, affordable, things. Yeah, and I think in particular on the imports especially, which is pretty much all we did here, because of the import and, Stacy said we import wines and we wholesale wines. So in most of the time, if we're just wholesaling it, we have a pretty fixed margin. But some of the best values of anything we do are on these imported wines, in particular the ones that if you turn them around, say imported by Vintage Imports, because that's where we're able to utilize both our import license and wholesale licenses at the same time. And we try to be nice, fair people. So I think in our book, these are some of the best values of everything we sell because of that. So that was a lot of what went into the selections. Also things that kind of took you on a trip around the world, sort of geographically, but also stylistically. And I think, the first one was a little off dry with a little bit of spritz. The second one had a bunch of acidity, but has this pronounced grapefruit thing. And the third one was rosés all the rage. And this was an affordable French rosé that's pretty close to Provence, but yet a different grape and a little cooler, I think. And the two reds, Piedmont, Italy, Barbera. I think this has been now for the decade we've been working with this family, like one of my favorite pizza wines and just easy to drink red wines. And then the last one, we picked the last one because it has a burlap bag around it, honestly. I mean, I'd love to.
Shamefully, yes, that's why we did it. So here's another one. If everyone can bring their attention to Tim and Kim, wave. They're getting married in 42 days.
Congratulations. I feel like I'm on the plaza with Hoda. This is amazing.
Yeah, right. So Tim and I went to high school together. We graduated together. So for those of you that are Cinnamon's in class of 85, it's Tim Anderson. You can't really see him. Say hi. And his lovely fiance, Kim, who I adore. That's another thing. All right, so everybody's loving the rosé. Some cinnamon, some nutmeg. People are wishing Karen happy birthday. They want to know if she's 21, so it's good. Karen's 21. Yes. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Barbera, Piemonte. I just love this little wine. Like I said, it's easy to drink. Asti, where is Asti? People know Asti from Asti Spumante from way back in the day. Asti is in Piedmont, Italy, which is in the northwest of Italy. Kind of in the foothills of the Alps. You may remember the Olympics were there a handful of years ago in Turin or Torino. And it's a pretty cool part of the world where Switzerland, France, and Italy all converge in the north with these really big mountains. But before you get up into the Italian Alps over there, is one of just the world's great wine regions. Piedmont is the home to Asti Spumante, as we said, but I think gets a lot more credibility as being the home for both Barolo and Barbaresco. If you haven't had a chance to try Barolo and Barbaresco, that would definitely be the 300 or 400 level wine tasting class with Stacy. And maybe the $300 or $400 wine tasting class with Stacy as well. But they really are some of the world's great wines made from the Nebbiolo grape up there. But those wines are very serious. They tend to be aged in oak and tend to need a little time to come around, tend to really need some hearty food to make them sing their best. But there are two other really great grapes in this region that are, I think, both, we could have picked a Dolcetto tonight. And been just as happy, Stacy. But I think the Barbera was a great choice, and it's kind of what the locals and the Italians, for even well outside of Piedmont, drink. Younger, it's just more approachable, more friendly, and like I said, it's really for them like it is to us. It's a wine you don't have to think that much about. There's not a lot of tannin. It's something that usually turns people off when red wines are really dry and tannic. And this one doesn't have that. It's just got kind of a roundness and a softness, and is just pretty easy to drink. And I think a overall great little food wine. So from near Asti in Piedmont is Cantina Povero Barbera di Asti.
While I'm thinking of it, does everybody know the 5 S's of wine tasting? Steve, do you know the 5 S's of wine tasting?
No, is slur one of them, Stace?
No, I was always taught see, smell, swirl, sip, and savor.
And then slur.
And then slur. That's the 6. We have a tiny little baby here. Look at this little baby at the Youngs. Look at this little baby. This baby is certainly not 21 years old. Look at this, very cute. People are saying that Barberas are some of their favorites. I don't know, Rich, like it very much. I think the Roberts Traub Schoss group is getting a little hammered there. Did they not bring food?
You warned them.
I warned you.
Did you make them sign a waiver, Stace? I hope so.
Everybody's at home. Yeah. All right. Is everybody liking this Barbera? This is my favorite pizza wine.
I mean, well, there's not a lot not to like. It's really, like I said, there's not one size pleases all when it comes to wine, but this is about as close as I can get. And it's not because some people say about Pinot Grigio, oh, I love it. It doesn't taste like anything. But I don't know if that makes it a good wine. That makes it a really light wine. And I mean, again, if that's how you like your wine, then it makes it a good wine to you. But I think too often people feel the need to spend more money on wine than you need to. I think if you know what you like and aren't afraid to try some things, maybe from, the Napa Valley has a starting point of you can't physically, based on the cost of land and what they're growing there, make a wine for less than $20, but even $30. But when you go elsewhere in the world, you can really make great wines for not a lot of money. One of the things we haven't talked about is crop yields, but I think that also has a lot to do with the concentration you find in your wine. So Barolo and Barbaresco, which I mentioned before, they tend to grow the crops with far less grapes on a vine and allow those grapes to get more mature, more complexity, more nutrients, and more of everything. Those crop yields can vary from as little as 1.5 tons an acre all the way up to 6 or 8 tons an acre with things like Pinot Grigio. So depending on what you're looking for out of the grapes, these are important things that can really dramatically influence what you're getting. And in the case of Barbera, it grows pretty vigorously, and it's certainly, while not Pinot Grigio high, something that does produce pretty abundantly, and is pretty delicious and fruity, easy to drink, and good to drink when young.
We're getting some good comments on this one. A heavy cigar smoky scent. We're getting a
little, I get some cedar maybe, or tobacco.
Spice, yeah.
You know, it's funny because people don't think that's a good thing. I think if somebody says there's like a little bit of tobacco, and I'm not a smoker of tobacco, but if you have that, you know, people try, because otherwise, you know, nobody ever tries to dissect their milk like we try to dissect wine, you know? It's milk, for God's sake, you know? So it's interesting with wine because everybody's trying to, you know, give you some type of comparative reference for the aromas or the flavors. But, you know, so everybody's like, what, did they put peach in here? No, they didn't put tobacco in here. They didn't, you know, but when you make a wine, and with all the things that go into it, how you harvest the grapes, how you press the grapes, how you age the grapes, how you ferment the grapes, you can pick up an awful lot of subtleties that really can dramatically influence your flavor. But this one's friendly, nice, easy to drink, just good stuff.
All right, so Joe Singer said, how is this different from a typical Barbera?
Well, I don't know when you say a typical Barbera, they grow Barbera all over Piedmont. First off is Asti tends to be a little lighter and fruitier than the other place where you'd find a lot of Barbera in the region, which is Alba. They're just two cities, like all these French and Italian wines. All of the wines, not the grape varieties, but the wines are typically named after the towns or the villages or the cities that made them famous. Alba, it would be the producer of Barbera di Alba, and they're bigger, bolder, more fuerte renditions, like where this one is pretty light and you can see light through it. The Barbera di Alba tend to have a little bit more concentration, so possible if the question is coming from somebody who's had Barbera di Alba and is saying, why is this not as big as Barbera di Alba? And also, it's not aged in oak. You can age Barbera in oak. But with regard to a typical Barbera, I actually think it is a pretty typical Barbera in what it is. Maybe almost a little too typical or regular, you know, because it doesn't have the concentration or the oak aging or something of some of the famous Barbera. But, you know, there's a thing in the region. Most people don't try to make a great Barbera. And I don't mean they don't try to make a good Barbera. They don't try to make a great Barbera because the Italians don't believe Barbera can make a great wine. Barbera typically makes a good everyday drinking wine, but when they're looking to make great wines in Piedmont, they have Barolo and Barbaresco and the Nebbiolo grape to make their great wines, if you would, if you're talking about ageability, structure, power, and that kind of thing.
Okay, he said, that's exactly what I'm asking. Joe's friend Larry. Sorry, Larry. I'm sorry, I mistakenly called you Joe. All right, I haven't heard from a lot of people. Let's see, who am I seeing here? I see my new friend Barbara, who I came to visit in Branchburg, New Jersey yesterday. Hi, Barbara. And let's see, I see a lot of glasses. This is really funny. So a lot of people like this one. Everyone's saying that a few people are saying this is their favorite. So this is good. All right, so let's move on to the last one, and then we'll do some questions.
So Rioja, I love Rioja, but And I actually love the Tempranillo grape. If this is your first exposure to the Tempranillo grape, then you're in for a treat. Because I think it's probably the most versatile grape in the world of wine. I think it can make a really powerful wine or a really elegant wine. And if you're talking Tempranillo, there's really only one place. I mean, they try to grow it elsewhere, but to me, you're talking Spain, and you're pretty much talking Rioja. Or I do like the wines from Ribera del Duero a lot, where they also make great wines from Tempranillo. But Rioja has far more history, and I think the wines have more elegance. All of the Ribera del Duero Tempranillo to me is all about power, not finesse. They call the grape different things in the different regions too. In Rioja, they tend to call it Tempranillo, and in Ribera del Duero, which is a couple hours, about 3 hours north of Madrid, they call it Tinto Fino. Part of it is because it looks really different there. It grows much blacker with deeper color and darker skin. Excuse me. But this one is called Siglo. People typically call it Siglo Sacco, which I think means Siglo in the bag, because the bag has become a really big part of it. It's a big part of their marketing of this wine for sure. The producer is actually called Bodegas Manzanos, and they're a very large producer in Rioja. Rioja typically is broken down into 3 different regions. The Rioja Alta, which is Rioja, the highest altitude, Rioja Alavesa, and Rioja Baja. This is typically Rioja Alavesa wine, and it is almost always married to oak barrels in these regions. Tempranillo by itself is very light and plain, and tends to get a lot of character from marrying it to oak barrels. And different than maybe the great Cabernets of the world and other wines, the Spanish have become pretty good customers for American oak barrels. One of the most amazing things in the business of wine to me is actually the construction of a barrel, as well as visiting wineries. We've had a chance to visit some cooperages where they actually assemble these things. And it's really amazing. I mean, if you think about the way they're able to take a tree and, basically cut it down into these straight staves, and with only fire and water and metal create these barrels that are pretty impressive and obviously hold liquid without leaking. But the most important thing to me about the relationship of the barrel to the wine in this case is the toasting of that barrel, because a lot of people, when they start talking about oak-aged wines, notice that there's some vanilla that becomes prominent in wines that are aged in oak or see some type of oak treatment. And that is, I guess, if you've ever taken a stick and lightly toasted it over a fire before it chars and before it burns, it actually, there's a sweetness in the caramelization of the sugars or whatever that were inherent in the wood. And so part of the process of making oak barrels suitable to age wine in is the toasting of those barrels. So again, when you talk about what does a winemaker do besides just throw packets of yeast into grape juice, the winemakers typically select whether these barrels are old or new, because they will impact the wine very differently. Whether the barrels are charred a little bit or burned a lot. Again, both of them are employed heavily, sometimes combinations of the two. Where the oak comes from. American oak is not the most common in the world. Some people use it in Chardonnay, but the Spanish really like the way it works with Tempranillo. French oak is the most desirable. The problem is oak gets very expensive depending on how much you use it, where it comes from, and where it was made. But anyway, the Siglo Sacco is a pretty cool wine, and they also, I mean, not to tug at the heartstrings even more than we need to here, but they part of their thing is that they employ special needs people to make these sacks for them that go on the bottles, and they actually do the same. They have a Reserva and a Grand Reserva as well that also have little booties on them like these. They're kind of cute.
So I'm getting a lot of comments on this. Soft and rich, good with olives. A lot of people are giving this one, saying this one's their favorite. I'm definitely going to ask people to put in the chat which one was their favorite so far. So get cooking on that. Oh, look at Joanna giving me the big thumbs up. We have a question about decanting. So talk about decanting and when it's proper and when it's not proper.
Sure. Again, don't let anybody tell you can't decant. So much of the wine thing to me is a show. And to me, the decanting certainly puts on a better show. So put anything. I mean, you might not want to put the whites in the decanter, but and usually white wines. What the whole decanting process is typically designed to do, two things really it would be designed to do if you think about it. One would be, wine definitely does not have a straight line of life when it's living in a bottle. And depending on how long it's been in a bottle, a couple of things may happen. One is the wine gets kind of comfortable being in a bottle and there's no air in there, and it tends to shut itself down for aging. And if you're going to drink it and you want to decant it, it'll open up those flavors a lot. I opened the bottles tonight about an hour before we did this thing to kind of let them breathe a little bit. But the wines we were using tonight really don't need time to open or time to decant or anything like that. However, I bet you, and in fact, there's even, you could look at wine glasses kind of in the same vein, because there's even certain glasses that are designed to open the wine in the process of drinking it on the way from the glass into your mouth, almost like a decanter would open it up. But putting air into wine will change the flavors. And the other reason you might want to decant as wine ages, while we don't love it when it happens, there's some chemical change in the bottle whereby it starts to bond solids, and you could get some chunky sediment in an older wine that you might not have gotten in a younger wine. One of the things that's become quite common and popular is wines are not fined or filtered. And you'll hear people say, this is unfined, unfiltered, which is good, because you could be leaving a lot of good things in the wine, but you could also be leaving some bad things in the wine. And not bad like, oh, I'm going to get sick from them bad, but bad, I certainly don't want to chew on them while I'm drinking it bad. So the decanter helps you to pour off the 24 ounces or so that don't have chunks in it, and leave that last ounce or so in the bottle with the chunks. How was that?
That's a good answer. Yeah. Here's a question. Are organic wines unfiltered?
No relationship to fining, filtering, or organics. First of all, in this country, it's almost not even something you can talk about. There is barely such a thing as organic wine, because the USDA and FDA and everybody in the process mandates that not only the grapes be grown organically, but because of the processes, some of which we've talked about in our hour together tonight, like aging wine in barrels or aging wine in tanks or even putting CO2 in wine. This all requires you have a workshop and a lab. We call them wineries. But these wineries also have to be certified if you want to call a wine organic. And furthermore, to call the wine organic, you are not allowed to add sulfites. And that is the biggest problem that most wineries have. Sulfites are a naturally occurring byproduct of fermentation. So you can't have a wine with alcohol that doesn't have sulfites. They're in there. The added sulfites are meant to stabilize. I think Stacy would agree that while there are people out there that do and can claim or boast to have a sulfur allergy, they are really rare. I mean, really rare, and that most people do not have reactions to sulfites and added sulfites in wine, but there's still a real fine line there. So what you will see a lot of, though, and in particular in Europe, is wine made from organically grown grapes. So we do see a lot of that. But whether or not it's filtered has nothing really to do with how it's grown. You can grow wines with chemical fertilizer and still not filter it, or you can grow grapes organically and still filter them.
Oh, I love this. All right, so wait a minute. We have a hashtag. I think we're trending. I feel like, I don't know. This is funny. What's Molly? Unmute yourself. And what are we hashtagging here?
I don't know. What did we decide?
Oh, Stacy's Big Sip, or are we doing pajama wine party?
No pajamas.
Okay. Stacy's
If we're branding
Big
this,
Sip.
we're gonna brand it right. I like Stacy's Big Sip.
Okay, that's in. Everybody hashtag Stacy's Big Sip. Make sure you spell my name right. All right, so we have let's see. Everybody's. I can't even pick a favorite because everybody
Make
likes.
sure you spell it right. Yeah.
Exactly. An aerator. Talk about an aerator a little bit.
An aerator, basically, I have them. They've been in my cabinet there for a really long time. I don't want to say they don't work any more than I would want to say that the glass is designed to aerate don't work, or any more. The air, there is definitely something to be said, for a wine opening up. I'm not going to lie. I mean, to me, sometimes those flavors are not my favorite. So I don't always want to really open up a wine. I like freshness in wine. So what happens to me when people are leaving a wine on the counter for a couple of few days, it's not going to go bad so you can't drink it or be toxic or, there's nothing wrong with it. What happens is the flavor changes and it veers towards a little bit more what I would describe as a pruny or overripe flavor as air hits it. So it really depends on what I would be drinking and whether I would say I would or wouldn't want to aerate it. I mean, if I had a big, expensive bottle of Napa Cab that was too young to drink, but I was dying to drink it because it happened to me the other day. I got a new Barolo that I got, was just kind of the deal of a lifetime over at the old shop. And I was like, all right, I'll buy it. But it's a 2016 Barolo. It's a wine that they tell you to start drinking in 2028. I don't have that much patience. Sooner or later, I'm going to want to open a bottle of this. And when I do, it wouldn't be a bad opportunity to try out one of those aerators, because the goal or the thought behind it is that it helps simulate the aging process that the wine might be intended to go through. So maybe it can help you see what the potential of that wine coulda, woulda, shoulda been, but you drank it too young, or in theory. So, like I said, I got a case of that said Barolo I was talking about. 11 bottles are downstairs in the basement. I left one up here because I'm going to open it too young and try it because I just can't wait 12 years or whatever to see it come around.
All right, look, we have, all right, so first, Anne wants to know if these wines are aging worthy, or should we be drinking all these wines now?
It's a great question. Aging worthy. What is aging worthy? I think you could safely age any of these wines for a couple of years, but save the last one. I don't think you want to age any of them for more than a couple of years. Vinho Verde in particular is really meant to be drunk young. It's non-vintage very frequently, or if it has a vintage, you have to look very hard for it. It's in the code on the label they get when they submit it to the equivalent of the Consorcio in Portugal. But there's no big broadcasted vintage on that. It's meant to be drunk within about a year or two of it being produced to allow that acidity and frizzante. One concept of wine to always remember, the acidity will fade. It'll meld into the wine. One thing that'll always be there is the alcohol, and that's part of the process of aging wines. And so the wines that typically want to be aged for a long time are big, structured, tannic, big fruit, high alcohol wines, because at the time they made them, there were all of these sort of angular components that need time in the bottle to come together. But most wines don't really need or want to be aged very long. White wines, most of them to me, 3 to 5 year window, save a handful, a few that are designed to go longer. Riesling, oddly enough, is a grape variety that can age a really long time pretty gracefully. Rosés, again, meant to be drunk, excuse me, almost the year that they're made or the year after they're made. We don't really want anybody drinking old rosé. Red wines like the Barbera, still not designed for super long aging. 2-3 years, no problem if you forget about it in the back of the cellar or wherever, but meant to be drunk young. The Rioja, that wine could actually last for 10 years easily. It's designed for it. It's got the oak aging, it's got the structure, it's got all of the components. I don't want to say I told you so and have you come back in 10 years and told me, have you say, oh, you told me this was going to be great in 10 years, because one of the variables people don't consider when it comes to that is storage and how well are you storing it. So before you seek to buy and store a lot of wine or a lot of expensive wine, make sure you have good storage for it, because it's sensitive to temperature, it's sensitive to light. You really do want to try and lay it down on its side if possible to keep the cork moist, because if the cork dries out, it'll start allowing more air exchange than that cork was designed or supposed to let in. It'll prematurely oxidize and age your wine and so forth. So I think that's a pretty good answer to the question.
All right, one last question, and I don't even know how to pronounce this. Allergies to, I don't even know how to say this, Flaties allergies? I don't know what that is. Mary, unmute and tell us what this is.
Yeah, I'll be right behind you. So I thought it was the phthalates, right? They're like phenyl, diphenyl, phthalates. I thought that's what caused the allergic reaction, not the sulfite.
I never heard that.
No,
Yeah, so California, from what I understand, there's some areas of California where they try to be organic in their fertilizers and insecticides, but there's runoff from other vineyards. So in California, you're never really truly pesticide free, but in France, they've outlawed any of that, so there's no runoff from other vineyards. So you really don't have to worry. So a French wine is much less likely to cause an allergic reaction because they don't use those pesticides.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not familiar with it, but I do know about the certification and the problems with neighbors and runoff, and that being a big problem that in particular in California has prevented people from getting organic certification even for their vineyards, let alone for their wineries.
Yeah. All right. All right. 2 more questions, and then we're gonna. How long before these wines go bad? Meaning that we've opened them all.
Great question.
How quick do we have to drink them?
So there's a couple of things. Most people probably are not in possession of a can of argon gas. Argon is heavier than air and tends to settle on top of the wine, and so it's a plug for. We don't have anything to do with it, but some people use argon to help extend the life of a wine. Also, the temperature you store it at. Even your red wines will last better in the refrigerator. As a salesman, these days, all of our sales reps have these little fancy devices called Coravins that are basically little portable argon dispensing units that you can put a needle through the cork without opening the bottle, suck some wine out and replace the missing wine with argon gas. And it's basically a way that you can, in our business, sample a really expensive wine, which you normally wouldn't want to sample because it's going to only, be what it should be for a day or two. And this has been a way that people can really extend the life. So I would put anything you wanted to keep more than a couple of days. I mean, around here, whether it's a good problem or a bad problem, I don't really have that problem because the wine just seems to always disappear. I don't know who keeps taking it or where it keeps going, but no, for real though, if you keep it cool, the first one that will go south will be that Vinho Verde, and it's only just because there's air in that bottle, and even if you did try to preserve it, that little frizzante spritz that it has is going to dissipate. Sauvignon Blanc, again, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And it's really your personal preference. I don't want to go and even pontificate about how long they're going to be good, because you know what? Some people will have a bottle of wine on their counter for a couple of months and it's not going, it may start resembling vinegar a little bit more than it starts resembling the wine that we tasted tonight. But it's a pretty stable product. Not much can live in there if you've got it sealed tightly, other than the fruit flies that might be swarming around it like they do here sometimes. I would say, again, the same order that we tasted them in, lightest to heaviest, will also be the order with which they tend to go south. But hopefully you beat the curve and don't have any problem with that happening.
Okay. All right.
Are we good to go?
We're good to go. Anybody have any other questions? Arnsey, I see your face now. Hi, Arnsey. All right. I don't see any other questions. Anybody have another question? Lay it on me. Unmute yourself now. We're down to 50. We lost a few. All right. Everybody's having a good time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was lovely.
Thank you, Blacks. That was so much fun.
Andrea Stamen, Andrea Stamen thinks you look like Robert De Niro. That's all.
I guess that's a good thing, right?
That's a good thing. The McGills and the Rops are too quiet. I'm a little scared, Ernie. You're very quiet. But if anybody wants to stay on tonight, stay on. We'll chit chat. We'll Zoom it up. Thank you, everybody. This was lovely. And continue to send me pictures The before pictures when you're all sober and the after pictures when you're not so sober are my favorites. And if you don't mind, I'm going to post them all. So thank you, everybody. This was lovely.
Yep. Thank you for the support of obviously the synagogue, and also for the wines that my company represents. And obviously it was a lot of fun to see everybody and see you, Stace. And thanks for including me. It was fun.
Oh, thank you.